You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 15th of August 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing in association with Addis. Hello and a warm welcome to The Briefing, coming to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Emma Nelson, and coming up on today's programme.
If it's a bad meeting, it'll end very quickly. And if it's a good meeting, we're going to end up getting peace in the pretty near future.
The countdown begins to the Alaska summit, but in addition to trying to end the war in Ukraine, could Trump and Putin talk about calming the rhetoric about nuclear arms? Also ahead in the next 30 minutes, we look at China's invitation to Taiwanese veterans to help mark VJ Day. Taipei is not happy. We'll ask what happens when presidents replace experts with partisan players, and...
This is also, by the way, brilliant if you decide to go to the gym on your holiday, because often you won't be able to plug your headphones in there either, but this AirFly can do the trick.
Our tech correspondent David Phelan will bring us the latest devices to make our summers run more smoothly. That's all coming up right here on The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. In a little over 8 hours from now, just after 11:30am Anchorage time, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin will hold their first face-to-face meeting in 6 years. As has been widely reported already, the meeting is being held between the two men only, so there is an abundance of second-guessing going on. We know that a ceasefire in Ukraine will be discussed. But what else? Well, one possible subject to be covered is nuclear arms and whether the US and Russia can re-establish more positive relations. Well, we're joined first of all by Monocle security correspondent Gorana Grgić, who joins us on the line now from Zurich. Good afternoon, Gorana.
Good afternoon, Emma.
Now, let's just place this into context before we even start about trying to repair relations. Relations in terms of arms treaties, issues of trust have eroded dramatically, even before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
That's absolutely right, and that's something to do with the bilateral relationship and the whole sort of idea of sort of strategic equilibrium between the United States and Russian Federation, and this is something that has been part and parcel of actually the history of U.S.-Russia relations and even U.S.-Soviet relations. You know, if we talk about START and where this sort of idea of strategic arm reductions started, and that's in the early 80s actually with President Reagan, and how it actually came into being just as Cold War was ending, and where we've been since. So from START 1 to basically this idea of the New START Treaty, which is set to expire in February of 26. And bearing that in mind, we have to understand that basically a lot of the resets that United States and Russia have had, and practically every single president of the United States that has had to deal with Putin has tried to somehow reset the relations and make them workable, because there is this nuclear angle and factor in the equation of this relationship.
And the nuclear angle, what is it that they could in fact try to do? And indeed, who would mention it first?
Well, I think that there is an interest on part of Russia to basically try to broaden now the agenda of the conversation that will take place in Anchorage. And I think we have to take this into the context of the conversations that have been already going on this year. If we remember back in February, when we had these high delegations from the US and Russia meeting, and when they basically were talking about the normalization of relations between the two countries, as if Ukraine was not even part of that, right? As if this was yet another one of these kind of attempts at reset. And I think that in that it is in Russia's interest basically to set the agenda on that, to talk more about that, and kind of to say, well, we are actually offering you a concession, which is that now we will talk about extension of New START, which is actually set to expire, as I said, basically in 6 months' time. And this is a major deal because, Emma, there is no other treaty anymore that is governing the kind of the management of nuclear warheads. Everything else that we've had, basically part and parcel of the Cold War era legacy, has now been either withdrawn from part of the United States or from Russia. So in basically broadening the agenda, Putin is going to try to, I would assume, kind of make a case, hey, look, we are willing to talk. We are willing to give you basically something in exchange, right, of this sort of legitimacy now that we are being granted by having a summit and so on. And in saying that, actually, maybe not necessarily focus so much on Ukraine, which, again, if you talk about the process design of the talks, is not the way that one should go if you are serious about resolving the war in Ukraine, right? It should be way more focused on actual confidence building measures, on ensuring that there is ceasefire before any other discussions are brought to the table. So this might seem more of a kind of then conversation that has to do about US-Russia relations rather than conflict resolution in Ukraine, which is the utmost urgency.
Indeed, there is the reports again. We are obviously second guessing everything that could be happening in the next few hours, but there has been that line coming out that there is the duration and the scope of the meeting is limited in order to focus minds.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the term that I really like is performative uncertainty now on part of both sides, because we are getting into this summit with, expectations being lowered and then heightened. And the last thing that I heard President Trump say is that he expects that there is a 25% chance that the summit could fail. But, that gives us 75% odds that there might be something come out of it. And then again, when is it exactly that they're going to talk, being that there is also like a breakfast going on and who is going to be present and all of these things kind of all kind of swirling around. And it's quite insane in my mind to think that we now have countdown clocks to them meeting, right? And the world is truly watching when we do have so many of these question marks around actually what is going to be firmly on the agenda. And I don't think that this is something then that should instill us with a lot of hopes towards some sort of outcome that is going to be, determinatively good for the kind of prospects of Ukraine seeing peace sooner rather than later.
Gorana Grgić, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Zurich. Gorana is our security correspondent right here at Monocle. You're listening to The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. The time here in London is 8 minutes past midday. A quick summary of the day's other news headlines now from Chris Chermak.
Thanks very much, Emma. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's approval rating has fallen to 59%, down 5 points since mid-July. Many of those surveyed cited recent pardons for political figures as reasons for their negative assessment of the leader. Air Canada plans to cancel most of its 700 daily flights today due to unionised attendants preparing to strike over higher wages and unpaid work hours. Around 100,000 passengers now face disruption as they seek alternative plans during peak travel season. And the inaugural World Humanoid Robot Games has kicked off in China, drawing 280 teams from 16 countries to compete in sports and technical challenges. The events range from track and table tennis to tasks like sorting medicines and cleaning. Organizers say the activities also provide vital data for practical robot applications. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you, Chris. Now, the one common theme among Donald Trump's appointees to his government is that their previous CVs may not have been absolutely relevant to the role that they are given in government. For example, the Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth was better known as an anchor on Fox News before he took responsibility for the world's biggest military power. Similarly, people who are qualified to do their jobs are losing them as they fall foul of President Trump. Well, one such case is the recent hiring of E.J. Antony as the new Commissioner for the Bureau of Labour Statistics. E.J. EJ is an alumnus of a right-wing think tank, and filling such an important and indeed impartial role with a partisan is prompting questions. Well, Vicky Price is an economist and former joint head of the UK government's economic service. Someone, Vicky, I would imagine, is that you prize impartiality above anything else.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, I would say that, wouldn't I? But economists rely an awful lot on the data that come out of the statisticians. And if we don't get the right data, then we make the wrong predictions, the wrong decisions for the government or for companies. So it is absolutely vital to have that confidence. And who runs the statistics office is also of significance. I mean, the UK would tend to have statisticians do so. But obviously, the US seems to be moving away from that.
So the Bureau for Labour Statistics, EJ Antony, who is EJ Antony for starters, and why is this a problem?
Well, it's a problem. You've just explained that he wasn't actually a statistician, but the problem has been that some of the data that's coming out of the Bureau of Statistics has been revised quite significantly. In fact, this is something that happens everywhere. We've just had a revision in the UK in terms of our GDP. So a couple of months ago, we thought GDP in April was falling quite significantly. Instead of falling by 0.3%, fell by 0.1%. It actually changed completely the outlook for the quarter as a whole. The statistics in the US have been, just like the jobs market here, a bit difficult to estimate accurately month by month. And that, of course, has led to quite substantial revisions. It looked like they were doing well. And one of the reasons why the Fed has not changed interest rates in their last meeting is because they thought the jobs market was actually quite strong. What we've seen, of course, since with the revisions that this is not the case, was not the case, and various possibly, quite substantial moves were made by various bodies which were forecasting things in the US based on those figures. And of course, the Fed itself didn't cut interest rates partly because of that. So that, of course, has not pleased President Trump, who is depending quite a lot on interest rates coming down to make up for any increase that there might be in concerns about tariffs. And that, of course, hasn't happened yet. So it seems like this is a political appointee. Admittedly, heads of statistical departments in the US have to be also approved generally by Congress. So this one seems to be even more of a political appointment than normal. Let's see what happens next.
Well, the key element to the Bureau of Labour Statistics is that it is the department which publishes the labour figures for the country, and such as things like inflation and indeed jobs and unemployment rates are often those big headlines which can set not just the tone but the legacy and people's opinion of a leader.
Well, you're quite right. And of course, if you're promising growth generally, then you have to look at the figures on unemployment, and that is an indicator of whether you're doing well or not on this. But of course, unemployment is a sort of lagging indicator. It's one of those funny statistics where, the mood may have changed a little while ago, but you're only just beginning to see job losses happening now. So the mood, of course, was changing in the States because of tariffs. And early on, there was loads of importing of goods from abroad. That, of course, inevitably meant that you were going to be thinking, you're hiring. Are you going to be producing things at home, or are you going to be relying on what comes from outside, trying to avoid having to pay the higher tariffs as much as you possibly can in advance of those being actually implemented? So there's a lot of that. So we get a lot of noise in the statistics of the labour market. Also, of course, what we've seen since the pandemic, particularly, is that labour statistics universally, the UK has suffered from that, Europe has suffered from that, and the US, of course, too. The surveys do not give you the right information because lots of people just don't bother, or haven't bothered in the past because of COVID and other problems, to answer the survey. And the statistics have become considerably less reliable across the board. So it's not just a US issue. So the fact that they suddenly get revised shouldn't have surprised us hugely. But of course, it does affect perhaps the perception, as you rightly say, of where one is going with the economy.
How much is actually storytelling essential to this? The fact is that in order for a brain to process a fact, it kind of has to turn it into a story. We require a little bit of work to process a fact, yet our brains are predisposed to absorb and memorise stories very easily. Is this just a question of people finding the person who tells the right story to interpret the figures?
Yes, but it's in many ways worse than that, in that people can come and interpret the figures in a different way. So if you want to be showing that the economy is doing well, you could find some bit of the statistic that is positive. If you want to be showing the economy perhaps is suffering, you could perhaps look at the longer term outlook, or perhaps whatever may be worrying businesses right now in terms of their intentions, and present the whole situation differently. So I'm afraid statistics can be manipulated and have been manipulated. And of course, you can use exactly the same statistic to offer a different point of view, completely diametrical, if you want to. It has been my experience. I went on some program using a statistic and saying, well, that's pretty bad, because of course I did my impartial economics thing. Someone else came, not an economist, and used the same statistic to prove the opposite in their minds. And what listeners make out of this is really confusing. The result has been that loads of people just switch off. They don't necessarily believe what they're being told. And that, of course, reduces trust to the government. And that is very bad news in terms of being able to implement any policy that makes sense for the future.
The economist and highly impartial commentator Vicky Price, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing. 1916 in Taipei, if you're listening. Events have been held to mark the 80th anniversary of Japan's defeat in the Second World War today. And as well as ceremonies in Japan itself, several of Japan's neighbours are commemorating the anniversary too. China in particular will be staging a major parade next month, and it has invited Taiwanese veterans who fought against Japan to take part. Well, Brian Heo is the founding editor of New Bloom magazine and joins us from Taipei. Good evening, Brian.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
And Taiwan is not happy about this invitation.
Yeah, that's right. There is this issue of Taiwanese veterans going over to China, and they may leak military secrets, in fact, or they may make vows of loyalty to the People's Republic of China. And so this is an issue for Taiwan. It happens continuously, and this is the latest example of an event that the Chinese government has used to do this. When such veterans go over, it doesn't, of course, inspire faith in Taiwan's military to resist China.
Just explain to me a little bit more about this risk that these veterans actually pose, because if we think about it, these are veterans of dating back to what period, and what is their military relevance now, apart from the fact that they are highly symbolic and their bravery is to be celebrated, but what actual risk could they present to Taiwan?
It does depend. There are the spying cases of people that are active duty, of course, but then many of these retired veterans, they may be politicians, or it serves as a psychological warfare for Taiwan, showing that then, Taiwan, these veterans, they don't actually have faith in Taiwan today. What's interesting too, though, is that some of these veterans fought not only against Japan, but against the Chinese Communist Party, the ruler of the People's Republic of China today. And so their going over China also reflects this very complicated trend in which those that fought against what later became present-day China have sometimes gone over to China's side.
And Taipei has said that it has banned all of its officials from attending this parade in China, and I'm quoting here, rewrites history and tells alternate facts in their opinion. How much of a threat to Taiwan is this Chinese parade?
The parade itself, not particularly, though of course people will look at the details of the military hardware to analyze then the military dangers from China's capacities. But a lot of it is signaling. And what is actually, again, contradictory is that Taiwan was actually a Japanese colony during World War II. But then after the Chinese Civil War, the Chinese Nationalist Party came to Taiwan and assumed control. And so this also highlights the awkwardness when around 90% of the population are descended from those who were in fact Japanese colonial subjects during World War II. And Taiwan was in fact bombed by the Allies during that period.
And China's efforts in this persuasion of the veterans to go over and join the parade. Normally, the narrative from China towards Taiwan is one very much of hard power, whereas an invitation to participate, to join in, it's a very, very delicate balance of hard and soft power that the Chinese are engaged in here.
Absolutely. So this is a fight over historical narratives, but also having then veterans from Taiwan in this parade, that reinforces this narrative that China and Taiwan are one polity. And this is something that the Lai administration in Taiwan, which is much more pro-sovereignty, has pushed against. Because, for example, the People's Republic of China, which was formed after World War II, has never actually controlled Taiwan during its existence.
Brian here from New Bloom magazine, joining us on the line from Taipei. Thank you so much. You're listening to Monocle Radio. Now, the battle to battle Eurostar for its domination of the route between London and mainland Europe has just acquired a new player. Virgin says it is a credible competitor to the dominance of Eurostar and that it's got the trains to prove it. Well, Paul Charles is founder and CEO of the PC agency, the former director of both Virgin Atlantic and Eurostar. So we'll get to that in a minute, Paul, but welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to be with you.
Tell us what's happening.
Well, here you have Virgin being nicely aggressive towards Eurostar and basically saying that it intends to operate trains after 2030, so just 5 years or so away. And Virgin want to bring their signature and traditional flair to the service. They argue that Eurostar's had a monopoly for too long, that consumers are not getting the best service they could, and in true Virgin style, they can do it better.
And how do they propose to do it better?
Well, Richard Branson is essentially saying they have ordered new trains, some 12 new trains, which they believe will be able to run seamlessly through the Channel Tunnel. They've ordered them from Alstom. These are trains called Avilia Stream. And they're like the next version of the famous Pendolino, which Virgin famously rolled out when they used to operate the West Coast franchise. So this is an opportunity for Virgin to put trains on which are very new, which obviously are the most modern in any fleet running through the Channel Tunnel. And on board, of course, probably better entertainment or in-train entertainment, as Virgin wants to introduce to spruce up the service.
Is this a credible competitor? Because I'm not entirely sure how many times we have talked about another operator taking on Eurostar to offer different destinations, different routes and different trains. This idea of the monopoly of Eurostar has been threatened countless times, but no one's actually done it.
And that is the nub of this. I was working at Eurostar after 2003. And even back then, 22 years ago, there were those who were saying we would face competition, that they would be coming through the Channel Tunnel, snapping at our heels. And it hasn't happened. And back then, it was the German ICE franchise, very impressive product in Germany, who were saying we will run those trains by 2005. And 20 years on, it hasn't happened. So yes, there's been a lot of steam, a lot of air coming out from various people saying they want to do it. But I think this time it is more serious. It's not only Virgin, but two other operators, potentially in Gemini and Evelyn, who are saying that they may operate after 2030 as well. So this all comes down to whether the Office of Rail and Road, the ORR, as regulator, will allow these services to be run by other operators. And of course, Eurostar will fight that.
And will Eurostar have any ability to withstand this? I mean, given the fact that it has managed to keep itself the sole operator of the service between London and mainland Europe since it all began.
Yes, it's done a good job of being the monopoly operator, but let's not forget the high cost of operating along the high-speed line and through the Channel Tunnel. Ticket prices have certainly gone up as well over the last few years, not just because of inflation, but because of higher costs to operate, because of staff costs, catering costs, line costs. There are a lot of costs, and that has put off operators in the past and been to Eurostar's advantage in some way in being able to keep others out. But the reality is there is plenty of capacity through that Channel Tunnel and on the high-speed lines. So I think consumers would say we would like to see competition. We would like to see pricing reduce. We would like to see cheaper fares, and we'd like to see some element of competition because we might get even better services. That's not to say Eurostar has done a bad job. It's done an amazing job with the product it's got. But just think what it could be like, and this is what Virgin argue, with tougher competition, bringing down prices and improving the quality of service.
Now, you've worked for Virgin Atlantic and you've also worked for Eurostar. So we're going to sort of like ask you below deck, what are your thoughts on whether this is a good match or not?
Well, they're both fantastic brands in their own right. They've both been very innovative. They have both been mavericks to some extent in the various parts of the transport industry they've been operating in. Eurostar, without doubt, has been a success. If you look back, it's been operating for 30 years. It has managed to get through financial issues that dogged it many years ago, and it's been able to increase market share against the airlines, who have dramatically lost market share, for example, between London and Brussels and London and Paris. So Eurostar has been a huge success. Virgin obviously has been very successful in different modes of transport over the years, whether it's planes or trains. But it's obviously lost its way train-wise in the UK, losing its franchise. And this is the way it believes it can come back, by operating something very sexy almost under the Channel Tunnel, through the Channel Tunnel. So I think it will be successful. There's no doubt about that. But we have to wait 5 years at least before it happens.
You can tell that you've worked in comms for both those companies from that last answer. Finally, I know when Eurostar has been saying, look, it within the next 5 years, I think it wants to take people to Geneva, to Frankfurt, and I think also to Cologne. That's a journey that's going to last up to 6 hours. I mean, having worked in aviation, what are the chances of people saying, OK, I am going to commit 6 hours of my time to a rail journey rather than a hop on a plane to somewhere else? OK, there's the paraphernalia of either side of check-in and departures, but 6 hours is actually quite a big chunk of your day.
It is, and that is in parallel with typically what a flight would be short haul. From, say, Heathrow or Gatwick to go to the south of Spain from door to door. So price is going to be king. Price is going to be key here. If the rail services, whoever's running them through the Channel Tunnel, can keep a lid on pricing and be much cheaper than airlines, they're going to be a huge success. But they're going to find it tough because of those higher costs. Yes, generally high-speed rail is built for distances of under 3 to 4 hours. That is when it's at its peak and it's paramount. That's when it's great for consumers. The moment you start going above 4 hours or so, it starts to be a bit of a bind compared with flying. So it's going to come down to price.
Paul Charles, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing. And finally, on today's programme, it's time for a weekly summer series where we tap Monocle's editors and leading contributors to regale us with their summer recommendations, from seasonal dishes and engrossing beach reads to magical vacation spots and lovely fashion tips. Or for this week's edition, Anita Riotta sat down with Monocle's tech correspondent David Phelan to see how the latest gadgets can enhance our summers. Anita began by asking him which items have become his favourite.
Well, I've just come back from holiday, so a lot of this is based on how I organised my holiday, so other options are available. The first thing is, back to basics, charge everything. All our gadgets need charging. Thankfully, they mostly use one type of connector, USB-C. Some older iPhones use a different one called Lightning, but now every Apple product and pretty much everything from everyone else uses USB-C. So get a decent cable. Nomad, a very nice Californian brand, makes the universal cable. And it's called universal because, as well as being a beautiful woven cable with very nice finish, it has a puck built into it, which is ideal for the Apple Watch. It's just by one end of the USB-C cable. So it means you can charge your phone, but additionally, if you've got an Apple Watch, you can plonk that on and you only have to take one cable. You don't have to get to wherever you're going and think, oh, I've left the charging cable for whatever that essential ingredient is. And that's great. Stage 2 is when you get on the plane and you're listening to music through your earbuds or your personal headphones. Fantastic. But then you decide you want to listen to the in-flight or watch the in-flight entertainment. And the problem is those earbuds don't connect by cable. So there's a very ingenious little device called the AirFly Pro, and it has a little connector that goes into the 3.5mm jack, exactly as the regular awful supplied headphones on the plane do. And then it has a Bluetooth transmitter, so it connects to your earbuds or your over-ear headphones through that instead. This is also, by the way, brilliant if you decide to go to the gym on your holiday, because often you won't be able to plug your headphones in there either, but this AirFly can do the trick.
Another thing we'll want to do on our holiday is capture as many memories as possible. What's the best way to do that?
I used my phone a lot, as we all do, but you can't beat a traditional camera. And Fujifilm has made a fantastic series of cameras in the last year, including the Fujifilm X106, which is small, very handsome, and takes tremendous photographs. There's so much more customization that you can do than you can possibly do on a phone, which means that it takes a bit of getting used to. But when you do, it's just tremendous, the photographs that you can take.
We've simplified our gadgets. We now have fewer chargers, fewer things to keep track of. We've made beautiful memories with our Fujifilm camera. You know, if you have a shared house with some friends, or if you are trying to enjoy an alfresco aperitivo on your holiday you've prepared for yourself, how can you set the ambiance, but while still being away from home?
Sure. Well, that's a great point. You just need a portable speaker. That's great. There's lots of them on the market, and a lot of them are terrible. Sonos makes a very nice, very small device called the Roam. It's onto its second generation now, and the Sonos Roam is great. It's small enough to be easily fitted into your carry-on. It takes up no space at all, but it's got plenty of volume, great tone, so that you can set that up in the corner of the room and it will be a very nice background sound.
You've brought two more gadgets in studio for us. One is something that I really should personally invest in to keep track of my belongings, and hopefully you are flitting about on holiday. How are we going to make sure that we leave our holiday with all of the things we brought?
Yes, it's very easy to leave things behind or to misplace things. There's a brilliant Apple device called the AirTag, works tremendously, but it's a bit lumpy for a wallet. So this is the rolling square Air card, which looks great, and it's a credit card sized device, a little bit thicker than one credit card, but not much more than that. And it uses the Apple Find My system, which means that anytime you lose it, you put it into lost mode, and anyone walking past with an iPhone or an iPad, any Apple device, the Air card will silently and anonymously send a message to that passerby, to their device, which will be sent on to you to give you the exact location of it. So, and there's so many Apple devices out there, it means that wherever you are, you can be sure someone will go past it and it will transmit to you.
It's absolutely brilliant. It almost makes it then a community hunt to find your lost wallet, wittingly or not. The final device you've brought in is, we must describe for listeners, it almost a little bit looks like it could be a prop in the next Dune films. It's incredible, and I think most people in Europe or around the world, if you're experiencing a heat wave right now, wherever you are, listen up, this one is for you.
It is, it really is. This is the Sony Rion Pocket Pro. So it's, I guess, about 14 centimeters long. It's a grey device with a sort of metal plate underneath. And then it's got, and this is the Dune element, though, it's a sort of ring of, not quite a ring, a rubbery connector that goes around your neck. I'll pass it to you because then when you turn it on, the metal pad is a cooling pad.
And you really feel it immediately how cool it is.
Absolutely. So this is a personal air conditioning device, for want of a better description. You put it on your neck, underneath your shirt, and it sits and it just cools the back of your neck. And it works really well. Obviously, it doesn't cool your whole body, but it gives you a great cooling feeling. And indeed, in winter, you can switch it to naturally warm you instead.
And that was Monocle's tech correspondent, David Phelan, speaking to Anita Riotta there. And that's all the time we have for today's edition of The Briefing. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producer Chris Chermack. Our researcher was Henry King and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back on Monday at the same time. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you for listening. Have a great weekend.